tech in the room real quick. They're going to put up we have a few members joining virtually. I think they're going to show up on the screen as well. So. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. So good afternoon, everyone. This is a phenomenal attendance. Welcome to this meeting of the National Shipper Advisory Committee. I'll just say many of the people in the audience I know are new to this process, so I'd like to take a little time to discuss how this committee works, who they are, and what's going to happen this afternoon. So first of all, my name's Dylan Richmond. I work for the Federal Maritime Commission and serve as the designated federal officer for this committee. What this means is that I am the liaison between the committee and the agency. I implement the FMC's charge as it relates to the committee and ensure that the committee abides by federal various regulations. I also assist with managing these meetings and ensure that the committee sticks to their agenda. The National Shipper Advisory Committee was charged by the United States Congress to advise the Federal Maritime Commission on issues that impact the shipping public and the supply chain. They are composed of members representing importers and exporters from numerous industries and of various size. They include large shippers, medium shippers, and small shippers. They raise up issues that they believe should be addressed by the Commission. Committee members are selected by the commissioners, and the Commission they serve at the pleasure of the Commission, but the committee is responsible for their own work. It's not influenced by the Commission. The audience in the room should note that today's meeting is independent of S&P Global and the Journal of Commerce. Those organizations are not affiliated with the committee and do not have any input into today's discussions. That being said, I would like to thank both S&P Global and the Journal of Commerce for their generosity in allowing the committee to meet following the TPM conference. Mark Saccone, in particular, and his team have been very helpful in arranging today's logistics. I also want to thank both him and the NSAC leadership with respect to understanding some of the potential complications that arose while planning this meeting. I do have some staff support from the FMC and would like to acknowledge Jeremy Lutz. I believe he's sitting behind me, who is attending with me today. He and Ellen Galantucci, who is in DC, serve as alternate DFOs for this committee, and they assist with the subcommittees and minute taking. I couldn't do this job without them. Also, I would like to recognize Commissioner Vekich, his counsel, Corey Sinkyu, and other FMC staff are in attendance today. Now, I'll touch briefly on the agenda for the committee. So the committee will initially discuss some of their ongoing work. They operate a number of subcommittees and discuss issues of critical importance to shippers. I will note, again, that these subcommittees and the topics they discuss are selected by the committee members. Following that, the committee would really like to hear from the audience. The TPM conference is one of the largest events in international trade, drawing people from across the supply chain. Mike will speak a bit more on this, but I know that the committee is eager to hear perspectives from a broad range of industry stakeholders, and they are looking forward to hearing comments from the audience today. So at this point in my remarks, I have a few housekeeping items that everyone, both members and the audience, should be advised of. The National Shipper Advisory Committee operates under the auspices of the Federal Advisory Committee Act. Because of that, minutes for this meeting will be taken. This meeting is also being recorded and will be posted on the NSAC's website afterward. Any presentations from today's meeting will also be made available on the NSAC's page later on. There are a few members who are joining us virtually. If you are not speaking, please mute your microphones, and the only people who should be on camera are committee members. My final points are for the committee before they launch into their discussions. Committee members are once again reminded that antitrust laws do apply to the members in today's discussions, and committee members are reminded that they cannot speak for the committee, the Federal Maritime Commission, or the federal government in their roles as members outside of the committee structure. They may speak to their personal observations as to their committee service and personal opinions on recommendations that the committee adopts. Thank you all for bearing with me through these. So with all that said, Mr. Chair, I confirm that there is a quorum of committee members present and the meeting can begin.
Thank you. Again, warm welcome to everybody who's attending the public meeting, whether you're in person today or virtually. As Dylan noted, it was intentional to try to co-locate with a large concentration of constituents that we try to represent as NSAC. And we're very fortunate again to have Commissioner Vekic and his counsel Corey here in attendance today as well. And we really want to thank S&P Global for hosting, right? This is the first opportunity where we've been able to be inside of an industry conference, again, to try to connect with more of you to, one, make you aware of what we're working on, but also more importantly, as we'll go through over the course of this meeting, to hear from you. Because while we've got a diverse cross-section of industries and shippers and regions of the country and directional flow, meaning importers and exporters, we know we don't understand everything inside of what we're working on, and it's important that we continue to engage with you and people who are joining us virtually to ensure that we're focused on the right things, we're incorporating considerations that need to be thought through, and that we try to build consensus on areas that can support the work of the agency. Before I go on any further, let's let the rest of the committee introduce themselves, starting with Allison, just so you know who's in the room, and then I'll have a couple opening remarks before we get going into the subcommittee reports.
Okay, I'm Allison Levitt, Managing Director of the Wine and Spirits Shippers Association.
I'm Dave Briggs. I'm the General Manager of Schooler's Global Shipping Business.
Gabe Rodriguez. I'm with a customs brokerage in Miami.
Steve Hughes. I represent the Auto Care Association and Motor Equipment and Manufacturers Association.
Chris Crutchfield, I'm the president and CEO of ACC Rice in Williams, California.
Sean Healy, Cargill.
Cliff Pinto, Office Depot.
I'm Mike Simonanis. I'm representing U.S. Cotton on the merchant side with American Cotton Shippers.
Rich Roach, Senior Vice President at Mohawk Global, and also representing National Customs Brokers and Forwarders of America Association and CBFAA.
Fernando Ragonel, Global Procurement Leader, Celanese.
Alexis Jacobson, International Accounts Manager at Bosco Trading, representing U.S. Forage Export Council.
Justin Colley, CHS.
Morgan Jackson with Walmart.
Steve Schultz with Blue Diamond Growers.
Deb Minsky, Category Ocean and Air Developer, Business Developer for IKEA.
For the ones that are online, the members online, can you sort of come off mute and announce yourselves?
Ken O'Brien, Gemini Shippers Group.
Excellent. I think I'll start on the top left of my screen. Jay Glidden.
Yeah, Jay Glidden, Ocean Spray Cranberries.
I think you're on. Are you on mute? You might be.
I hope not.
I want to thank the members of National Shipper Advisory, because for those that aren't familiar with it, everyone here is volunteering their time in support of the agency, right? And so we're into our third year of a 3-year term. And so we've had a lot of focused work over the time period across different areas of focus. And really, their presence today and attendance, whether virtually or otherwise, is essential to support the ongoing work of the committee. I do want to thank Jen Morrissey from Ocean Spray. She's changed roles within her organization, so after 2 years of supporting our work, is wound off NSAC and has been replaced by Jay Glidden, who's online today for Ocean Spray as well. I think a couple of things we want to convey before we really get into the subcommittee reports. NSAC has played a role to kind of help inform the commission as they deliberated the D&D rules. Rich will talk about it in fees and surcharges committee, but part of our role is to advise across the areas that were covered in the NSAC panel yesterday and are listed on the website within the FMC website. And we're going to continue to work with the agency and other stakeholders in the room and others who are not here with us today to address the ongoing focus on issues related to rail storage and anything else within the D&D rule that the industry believes needs to be discussed. At the same time, if you think about the Red Sea situation, other things going on geopolitically, changing supply-demand flows, changing alliance structures as we move beyond 24 and into 25, there's a lot of other things that are going on in the macro environment that may or may not affect how we work together. I think ultimately our focus within NSAC is how do shippers, the intermediaries, and those we work with the carriers to find more effective ways to improve what's going on in the system. And that is not just about personal benefit for the individual firm, but this is about efficiency and economic impact or gain in the United States and for our fellow citizens. Ken wanted me to convey, as he said before in these public meetings, that regulation is a poor substitute for communication. The focus should be on industry-based solutions, on better behavior between parties in the system within defined rules that are established. And when they can't, we find ourselves trying to figure out what can be done about it, but doing so in a constructive way. I think lastly, we're looking at this opportunity today to hear from you, because quite frankly, and we've been talking about it in every public meeting since we got started, that there's not been a lot of feedback. And I'm not here to say it with any kind of judgment. It's really the case that we need to hear from you, and it's not just us. I would say on certain notices of proposed rulemaking, the agency hasn't gotten a lot of feedback. And 21 and 22 were intense times for all of us, and so the attention was on running the business, mitigating risk, and dealing with a lot of other issues that we faced at the firm and country level. And now that we're starting to be on the other side of those things, what are we going to take away from that, right? What are we going to focus on beyond what we're already looking at today? And so I think sometimes when we look at these complex issues, we're seeking the perfect solution. And I like to continue to go back to Winston Churchill's quote that perfection is the enemy of progress. We've got to start someplace, right? And we've got to start from a place that is collaborative, where it's not Party A's fault or Party B's fault, or if just if Party A did what they needed to do, everything would be great. These are long-standing and complex issues. The only way forward is collaboratively, because even if we sought more regulation or legislation, that doesn't necessarily address the underlying relationships that are functioning in the system. So it's my personal belief that, as the largest economy in the world, the U.S. should lead on this. There isn't any reason that we can't across the issues that we're facing here, whether they're inside of our borders as it relates to container transportation or outside of it. We should be having a lead role in trying to move toward better. So what do we need from you? We need deeper engagement, right? Everybody's time is precious, and we want to be respectful of that. But if there's an issue that affects your firm, your region of the country, your industry vertical, we want you to participate in what NSAC is working on and what the agency's working on, because they're guided by you in terms of trying to make informed changes to rules, or if they're looking at something new as far as rulemaking. And so, again, we look at this meeting today as an opportunity to really hear from you after we go through a high level and detailed focus of what we're working on. And I'll turn it over to the subcommittee chairs.
Before we turn it to Rich, did we figure out the thumbs up? All right, can we do a quick round of introductions for the virtual people, please? So I believe Jay Glidden is at the top left for me.
I'll try it again. You guys got me? All right, awesome. Jay Glidden, Ocean Spray Cranberries.
All right, thank you. Claudia, I see you.
Claudia Moshiri with Brentag North America.
Thank you. I believe that's Ken in the bottom left.
Ken O'Brien, President, Gemini Shippers Group.
And then finally, Tony in the bottom right.
Tony DeBauer, Tyson Foods.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. At this point, we'll turn it over to Rich for the...
Thank you, Dylan. I guess you've already heard a little bit about engagement. We're looking forward to it, and it's something that we're really in need of to proceed. But we have done a lot in the couple of years that we've been working. Fees and surcharges subcommittee has put forward several recommendations, and what we have been waiting for is to see how they'll be addressed, not just the formal response that we get back from the FMC, but also in enacting in rulemaking whether these recommendations might rise to the ability to be put into the rulemaking if appropriate. So we are fortunate this year that we have two rules that have just dropped recently. I will say that I'll preface this with this is our subcommittee work that we're doing here today as an active subcommittee where we're starting to float ideas on things that we will do next. And but in doing that, we're also going to look at summarizing what's come out of the FMC just recently. So the first is the carrier automated tariffs regulation. I'm sorry. Good idea. First is the automated carriers tariffs recommendation. That's effective date is 2/1/24. And just a few bullets of what it did. It eliminates tariff access fees, so everybody should be able to access NVOCC and VOCC tariffs without any cost. It allows NVOCCs to cross-reference VOCC tariffs. So this was an interesting enhancement to how we operate with our rates, our filing, our tariffs, our contracts, is that when we have something that comes through on a VOCC contract or tariff, that we can actually cross-reference that into our own. And so it actually helps streamline some of the process without having to go through this formal filing process. It also defines NVOCC pass-through charges. So pass-through, when the VOCC has a charge and the NVO is passing it through to their customers, it's done as it's outlined in the regulation without markup. If it's done without markup, it can be passed right through as long as that line item appears on the invoicing as the same as the VOCC. One of the things that we further defined within the scope of that is whether or not disbursement fees are considered a markup. And so the FMC has come down on the side of disbursement fees as long as they're a separate line item are allowable and not considered as a markup charge. So a good final definition for something that we've been asking about for a long time. The rule also defines co-loading for LCL differently from co-loading for FCL. That was kind of a surprise to us. We all in the trade consider it co-loading, LCL or FCL, to be virtually the same thing, but the FMC sees it differently, so we're working through what that actually all means for us in terms of any technical changes that we might make in our agreements. And then there was also some miscellaneous definitions and tariff processes. So this encompasses a lot of administrative regulations, more aimed at the VOCCs and NVOCCs in how we act internally with our tariffs and with our service contracting and all. But I think an improvement and some clearing up of things that we've been considering for a long time. I throw this out to the committee, my subcommittee here, for further discussion after I get done. If there's anything that we want to take up on this, we'll be reviewing in future subcommittee meetings. The next and long-awaited demurrage and detention billing came out with an effective date of May 28th, 24. That's not an inclusive of everything date. There's a part of the regulation that will have a further effective date later on when there's some more confirmed about it. But just going through sort of quickly and high level on this, it does confirm the data elements and processes for invoicing demurrage and detention. VOCCs, marine terminal operators, and NVOs must comply with these billing rules. I underlined MTOs there because there had been some ongoing dialogue about whether the MTOs actually were subjected to the rule or not. The FMC came out clearly saying that the MTOs will have to comply with this rule in all of its parts. So that's something that may force a bit of a change in operational behavior for the MTOs that hadn't been occurring since the OSRA rule came out. The bill also defines who is the billed party, the billing party, and also defines who is a consignee and how they may be applicable to demurrage and detention charges. I know that was one that required a bit of internal communication within the commission, and one of the things that we think has come out in sort of the evolution of the merchant clause on the terms and conditions, which is on the back of all bill of ladings, that sort of encompasses everyone sort of haphazardly can be held liable for any kind of demurrage or detention fee at the end of the day, and sometimes unfairly targeted parties that were really not subjected to or shouldn't have been liable for those charges. So it really more clearly defines who can be billed, who can be the billing party, and then there's also who cannot be billed in here. The fact that you can bill the shipper, which has privity to the service contract, and the consignee, I think is a good move. The consignee, in the case of imports, when you're talking about demurrage, which is probably the most case that of demurrage would be applied, does have really the final, it will be final holding the bag of the liability for that demurrage charge. What I will say, however, is that it does not mean that another third party is not entitled to pay those invoices. So to be clear, while only the shipper or consignee may be invoiced, any party may pay the invoices. 541.5, missing data elements voids the obligation to pay. We've known this since OSRA. And then also 541.6 defines those data elements, the 13 data elements required on the invoice. Again, those came out with OSRA and were not of any real surprise. Then the last two taken together, invoicing required within 30 days of the demurrage or detention event. We call this the 30-30-30 rule because, again, the bottom one allows 30 days to dispute and 30 days to resolve. So the invoice must be billed. The demurrage and detention invoice must be billed within 30 days. And then the billed party has 30 days to dispute that. And then the billing party has 30 more days to resolve that. In the bill, there's also some wording that says that the FMC will allow an extension of the 30 days for resolution if both parties agree to that. So that's a good remedy for that if it hasn't been resolved within 30 days. I will say it's not the sole cure. So while the ocean carrier or MTO must bill within 30 days, if the consignee or shipper has not disputed it within 30 days, they can no longer take advantage of this mechanism for dispute resolution, but there are still other mechanisms at the FMC, including caters, charge complaints, small claims, and full-blown claims that could be made with the FMC. So all in all, I think that with the intention that the FMC had and heard our arguments about merchant clause, that it has taken the customs broker out of the liability chain and the trucker out of the liability chain of being held hostage at the end of the day for a demurrage or detention bill that would maybe not rightly be theirs in the first place. So we were pretty happy with, I think, the way the bill came out so far. There's room within the bill in all of the dialogue of the 115 pages that comes with the bill, that there's ongoing discussion about other parts that were not specifically addressed or not resolved maybe in everyone's minds. So I'll just go through the 4 points that we see as potential ongoing dialogue for our subcommittee and where we might go with this. The first is, while the bill mentions many times that the Federal Maritime Commission has jurisdiction over rail charges, or let me back up. While the FMC says many times that the FMC has jurisdiction over demurrage and detention charges charged by certain entities, including VOCCs, MTOs, and NVOCCs, for goods that by any other name are charged demurrage or any other charge, but for residing on marine terminals or for the use of the container, that they do have that authority. What it does not say is, it doesn't say that they have authority over storage charges from railroads that happen even on through a bill of ladings at the rail terminal. And so this is one of the areas that we've looked at and actually made a recommendation on in the past, that the word marine be stricken from that definition of demurrage and detention, so that it's charges for land storage, and that storage be added to the part that says any charges including storage. Would be one way to satisfy and answer once and for all, does the FMC have in fact jurisdiction over storage charges that are assessed at the rail terminals on a through bill of lading? This dialogue has been going on for quite a long time. It was suggested to us that we meet with the STB, which we have done in the past, and the STB has made it clear to us that they do not have jurisdiction, that they don't necessarily want jurisdiction, and there are 3 different bodies of legislation, including the Staggers Act, that prevent them from having that jurisdiction. On the other hand, the FMC in this demurrage and detention rule does point out that they have jurisdiction over demurrage and detention on through bills of lading, but it still remains a question of, does that include storage at the rail terminals? So we're watching, and will continue to watch, the M.E. Day case, which is crucial, I think, to answering this in terms of case law. If that conclusion comes through, that we would have a clearer answer one way or the other. My question is, if not the STB and if not the FMC, then who's the regulatory authority that would have authority over this or jurisdiction over these charges? Our work on this has been ongoing. It was actually the very first recommendation that we brought 2 years ago, and it stirred up a lot of public awareness, and of that public awareness has been an outcome of a letter to Congress from 77 trade associations that asked them to look into specifically this storage, and so that, I understand, is an ongoing thing that Congress is and perhaps actually will look at it, and so that'll be interesting to follow what that has happened and what will happen in the future there. So we'll move on from that. Did it go? Okay. The other recommendation that we had put forward as the Fees and Surcharges Committee. What do you say? One more. Okay, got it. Yeah. The other one is the early receipt date, and another that we had made a recommendation. We cited a lot of different examples. We were hopeful that it would have been addressed in the demurrage and detention final rule. But unfortunately, it looks like it's going to be one of those that will have some further discussion. And in fact, I think that what we've heard is that Commissioner Dye is looking at some initiatives of her own, and early receipt date is one of them that she's convening some innovation teams and pilot on. I think our hope was that these would have come to fruition much sooner, because the changing early receipt date costs a lot of money for extra fees for trucking and storing and redelivery, and sometimes actual demurrage charges that really, we don't have control over as shippers who are moving the containers according to the originally issued early receipt date. And so it's a practice that needs to potentially be looked at in how it could be made more fair. remedies on that would be challenge according to the interpretive rule, or perhaps this 30-30-30 rule when it becomes effective, that you can still challenge any demurrage charges that would be assessed as a result of change in ERD. And then the other one that we were really hopeful for to see in the D&D final rule, but did not make it there, was the recommendation that we had earlier on government holds, or the fact that demurrage and detention for government holds would even be addressed within that bill, and the bill was silent on that. I think that there should be a lot more dialogue on this in particular. There's a whole body of work that we've done on it, and I don't want to repeat it all for the sake of it is on our website, but for the sake of time, suffice to say that there may be a way that, or the way our committee looked at it from all sides, not just as shippers, but also from the carrier side and from the terminal side, that we're all in this together, this government hold issue. And so when you think about the short government holds, maybe they're inconsequential and they're, a few $100 or a few $1,000s here or there. And then you get into these major cases of government holds that, go into the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, over $1 million for extensive holds for many, many containers. And you have to understand that there's a windfall profit if 100% of the tariff or contract demurrage and detention could be charged to the shipping public. And so what we did was we broke it down into what we thought would be an asset covering charge versus asset plus punitive, which creates the whole demurrage and detention charge to begin with. And so if you remove that punitive piece, which is probably the largest portion of the charge, and what we suggested was a 25% cap on the contract or tariff demurrage or detention charge, that it would be fair for the customer to pay that, the shipper to pay that, the consignee to pay that, versus having 100% of that fee charged and the terminals and or the carriers, making that windfall profit. So there's the room for discussion on that one, I think. Maybe it'll something that we could take up and do some more research on, and something that you can engage with us on. You can tell us how you feel. We'd love to hear it. We'd love to hear some other ideas. The commission says that it's hard for them to make a one-size-fits-all solution, but and that's, we gave a technically correct, I think, recommendation to do so. But on the other hand, maybe there's some other ideas we missed out there. So I think it's one that the Fees and Surcharges Committee will do well to revisit. All right, and yeah, and the last of the four bullets that was up there was on the definition of availability. And that's something that, I first came aware of that in the innovation teams that's going back now almost 10 years, that notice of availability was something that was discussed by all stakeholders when we did those innovation teams. A good, I think, proposal to have that as a data element, define it, make it a milestone. It might be a new data element that we have to deal with, but I think there's an outcry within the industry that is needed. And so if you agree with me, I think that's something we'd love to hear from all of you on your comments on maybe how that would work or how that would benefit. It's also one that Commissioner Dye has taken up as one of her 3 initiatives. And she is soliciting volunteers. I don't know if any more, but it's something you can reach out to her. And if you're interested in helping on the solution for that, she's doing some pilots and an innovation team on notice of availability. The third of her initiatives, I believe, is chassis return, or I'm sorry, container return. So I think as we go forward, looking at where we go next for our subcommittee, there's a couple of other initiatives. There's a couple of other initiatives that the FMC is close to finishing or will be looking into soon. One is refusal to deal, and the other is on shipping exchanges. We would solicit your input on all of that as well, so that we can discuss that, and we would be taking that up probably in our next meeting. additional looks maybe at the Red Sea issue or the Panama Canal issue, just as some other topics. And lastly, the Transportation Research Board study on chassis is something that may be coming out at some point here during our term, and then we might be looking at that as well. So I'm going to stop there, and then I would say that if my committee had any internal questions or comments, I would take them now.
I think just from the perspective of the ERD, I know on the data side, we've contemplated looking at it beyond just the ERD, right? From an exporter perspective, of which myself and our members are in AXA, it's the combination of the three potential data elements or dates that impact our ability to make the ship, right? So the first is the ERD, the starting point of it. But if the other date, the dock cutoff is changing as a consequence as well, or the last receiving day is changing, there is potential impact to being able to make the ship, which results in a splitter roll, and the exposure to charges. And so it's more to be brought up in the broader context of awareness for the people in the room, because we've talked about it in other public meetings. It is in the work that we've done. But we want to make sure that we're looking at it from the right perspective, right? Because a lot of us on the export side are really focused on the ERD, and that is the immediate impact, and maybe that's the place to start. If you are an exporter in the room that is being impacted by the other two moving around, then maybe the totality of the three is the approach. But I think we just need, again, we're seeking greater participation to get some guidance on which is the right place to focus on inside of it. Commissioner Guy has got a particular perspective, and it's the right one. A lot of us are focused on ERD, but in reality, when the vessel schedules are changing and when they're going to arrive at berth is changing, all three are changing. And that can create a lot of complexity, whether you're a large exporter or a single-person shop. And so between data and the exposure for the lack of good data, you know, which is the right way to focus in on and make sure that whatever comes out of the work, it's reflective of the experiences of the people in the room and those you work with. What's your take, Rich?
Sure, and I think, you know, when we were discussing it for the first time, we didn't have as broad a view of it, and it's been discussed in also our data side of the data committee, and you may hear more about it there, but we look at that receipt window as something that's pretty important. So certainly, again, worth revisiting. Any other comments I throw to the committee?
So yes, I have a comment, and while the issues on the ERD are now much less than in 2022 and 2023, or even 21 and 22, I think the agency needs to really take this as an item that we have learned by pain. It is time to really go back and resolve the issue and not wait for the next crisis to come, and we still have done absolutely nothing for it. So again, a little bit of urgency to the agency to take on the recommendation and really come out and say, this is what we would take to resolve.
Thank you, Fernando. Any other comments from the committee?
I have one. So during your review of the D&D rule, there's two pieces. So one says dwell is defined under demurrage and detention, and then in another place it states that multiple parties cannot be charged the same invoice. So I'm curious to understand from the FMC, and maybe we can submit this through a Q&A and the subcommittee's work, does that mean that long-term dwell at ports and terminals cannot be charged to BCOs and the steamship lines? So
I think it's an excellent observation, and maybe in my third read of the rule, I might pick up that point, but I'll put dwell into the search, and I'll probably come on it fast enough. I have you listed down as question number 8 for the FMC. So
only 8? You only have 8?
And I am soliciting questions from anybody after this is over. If you'd like to see me, I'll take your specific questions on the D&D rule, and if I can't answer them right off, they'll be added to after number 8. Back over to you, Mike.
All right, I think next will be the Data Visibility Subcommittee update from Gabe Rodriguez. You guys can Give us a minute to pass this down.
I don't know if they have them uploaded, but I'll start off in any case. So the data subcommittee, we've been meeting for quite some time, just to give a little bit of a recap, for quite some time, initially coming up with a list of the different data points that we felt or heard from our constituents or from our own companies, found that were important data points that needed to become more transparent, more visible, or outright just given to the industry, so that all of the stuff that we've gone through over the years, and especially over the period of COVID, could help accelerate the movement of cargo. And so we came up with three initial recommendations, and then a fourth kind of a technical correction. The first was on vessel level data, the second on container level data, and the final one on intermodal data. And my slides kind of reflect all the data points put together. Thank you very much, Morgan. Great 3 slides, basically pointing out all of the data points, and it considers from end to end, ETA, ETDs, availability, and so on and so forth, all of the general information. That was submitted to the FMC, and a response was provided in February of 23. These were, there we go. No, it's still fees and surcharges. It's okay. Okay. Essentially, those were submitted in December of 22 and February of 23. The FMC confirmed back to us, that with their response, essentially that the work that we were doing aligned with the ongoing work of Commissioner Bensel and in his MTDI, the Maritime Transportation Data Initiative, and so that would be taken into consideration as he progressed with the MTDI report. From there, we essentially kind of took a step back and said, all right, we've done all this work, we've put all this information together, let's start continuing, or let's continue to outreach to any entities in the industry, just to validate that work, validate that information, and continue just ongoing engagement to see if we could get additional data points or additional background on those data points. From there, the MTDI itself was released in, in April of 23, and Commissioner Bensel did, an incredible job of gathering, I think it was 18 different meetings, over 80 stakeholders in the industry, and most of the information that we had submitted as data points that we wanted to have transparency and visibility on were incorporated into that report. Now that is a report, and then has, ongoing work for approval within the agency, and then ultimately regulation or guidance or some kind of a ruling or whatnot, and that's in its process, right? There was a request for information that was issued in August of 23, ended in October of 23. My understanding is there may be another request for information for additional clarification on the work of the MTDI before it continues to move on. So we as a committee, as this is now going through its proper government channels, continue to meet, continue to try to engage with industry to see what validation, what additional issues were necessary, what additional data points would be needed to continue. And in our Q4 meeting last year, there was 2 entities that came out and gave a small presentation as part of our subcommittee presentation. One of them was ASTM, the Standards Board. The other one was DCSA, the Digital Container Shippers Association. Both of them are doing ongoing work as far as defining standards to these data points. And the ASTM itself has about 12 different, here we go. So we'll jump forward. No, still not working. Okay. So the ASTM basically has about 12 different work groups coming up with all the different data standards, and they're expecting to have something by the summer of 2024. In the meantime, the Digital Container Shipbuilders Association is an entity that was formulated by the major carriers, by 9 of the major carriers, and they started working on standards themselves for digital interoperability, trying to get the industry connected. So they've put out a couple of different standards on track and trace, and just recently put out a standard on vessel schedules. We found that that information to be, as Mike said, in lieu of perfection, start moving the needle on something. What is it? Protection is the enemy of progress. So in order to at least have something start moving forward, let's try that one more time. I'm giving up. I'm almost done anyways. So, we found the DCSA's work to be something that's within the industry already, given to the carriers directly, standards that would align at least 9 of the major shipping organizations. Woo-ha, we got it up. There we go. So just to go back real quick, these are the data standards, and I'm not going to walk through them. They're up on the NSAC's website, on the FMC's website under the NSAC tab, I guess. Those are all the different data points that we came up with. So we are up to here. So Digital Container Shippers Association has those standards, came out with already a couple of different betas that they've carried across to various carriers. Again, these 9 carriers are pretty much within the top 10 carriers within the world. So if there's appetite to adopt those standards within each one of these carriers, it would essentially align a large majority of containers that are being shipped around the world to align with the standards that they've put out. Just recently, there was an industry support letter that went out just before TPM, and it was signed off by 44 major U.S. organizations pushing forward these data standards and requesting that the carriers push them out and make them operational into their day-to-day operations as companies. From what I understand, there's 2 carriers that have already replied back that they already have those vessel schedule standards adopted already, and they'll be rolling those out soon. The other carriers are still pending response, but we hope that they'll start moving the needle on that as well. So, in lieu of having, or I guess aligned with, parallel to the work that's being done by Commissioner Bensel, operationally, commercially, already on the market, these carriers are already starting to move that needle forward. DCSA has been pushing that. The ASTM standards will be coming out over the summertime. So we hope that continues to move that forward so that standards of data visibility and transparency will hit the market. So going back, that last thing said, any additional supporters, going back to our conversations or comments at every meeting, definitely need input from the industry as to the data points themselves, the viability of those data points, if that's all the information that's needed. Just recently this week, these are data points that we've been working on for 2 years, and just recently this week here at TPM was able to speak to somebody in the cold chain, and there's a couple of data points in the cold chain that we missed that we should be able to continue to push forward and bring on to the work that's being done here. So support for efforts like that are not directly through the NSAC, but is definitely an area where the industry can pitch in and help out moving that forward. So that's all I got. Back to you, Mike.
Do you want to speak to kind of the relationship between the data subcommittee and dialogue you've had with DOT Flow? Because I think both in the DOT Flow panel earlier in the week, as well as the NSAC panel that S&P Global hosted, that kind of question came up. And so, where's the differences and where's their opportunity for collaboration as it relates to the agency's work?
So I'll expand that question even a little bit, and I'll get it to Flow eventually. So we, as a data subcommittee, meet on pretty much every other week and sometimes every week, where we are reaching out to different entities within the industry, and not only U.S. but worldwide, to get engagement, to get additional information, to build upon what we've already done. Within that, a lot of meetings with Commissioner Bensel in his office to work through the MTDI, and also with Andrew Peterson over at DOT Flow. So I would say, just in a simple explanation, Flow is more of a high-level weather vane, showing the situation at the ports, fed by data from the industry. The work that we're looking for is the more granular day-to-day, shipment by shipment, container by container, port by port information. And so that's pretty much the best summary I can give it. But there's ongoing conversation with both Commissioner Bensel's office and Andrew over at Flow. We've met with him 2 or 3 times and have committed to continue meeting to support each other in the work that's being done.
You also want to talk about kind of how you're looking at data? Because again, we're not picking winners and losers here, right? And from a technology platform or a standard or
No,
a provider or
absolutely.
whatever. So speak
yeah,
to that a little bit if
to
you
the
would.
ASTM and DCSA, those are the first 2 that are out at market, and ASTM is obviously a well-known standards board, and their information is not just yet available. DCSA has their information available, and they're feeding it directly to the carriers. The information itself, for example, within a review that was done, I think it was 39 out of 41 or 39 out of 44 of the data points that we recommended are part of their data standards that they're suggesting to the carriers to adopt. So it's at market. We're happy to support within the level of support that we can provide as individuals within this organization. And should another entity come out with better standards or better information, then great. That's all. It's what we're looking for, is better transparency within the data that's provided by the carriers. Questions?
I have one. Gabe.
Go for it.
So just curious, what do you see as potential obstacles to adoption? And when you talk about that carrier group, I know that's not all encompassing. How do we get others on board?
So I think, baby steps. So each individual carrier is looking to adopt some kind of standards, at least from the 2 that I've spoken to already. They themselves have said that they are 100% aligned with the standards that were provided by DCSA, and they'll be carrying those out now in the next couple of months. One in particular should have it out in the next couple of weeks, according to them. They were already proactively working on standards. So the way that standard is provided, that's probably going to have a different look per carrier. But the fact that there's a standardized, lexicon for each different data point is what will align it across the different carriers. Now, to the second part of your question there, right now, 9 carriers are on board to this committee or to this organization. They are the founders of the organization. One by one, Rich, going after them one by one, hopefully the larger ones, and they are the 9 largest carriers. So adoption by them would essentially be a good portion of the market adoption. Then it's just a matter of continuing to push forward and having other carriers join on.
I'll note real quick, I think there is a question in the room. We'll come to you during the public comment period, so please hold it for that time.
And Gabe, I just have one quick question. Just I think many of us heard Hapag say this week that they are going to put GPS-type tracking on all of their containers. Has that been discussed in terms of how that level of technology will then, affect the overall visibility, and will there be an impact on what the work that's been done now, how that might change with that type of technology?
So there hasn't been direct discussion about that, although I will say Hapag has been one of the most engaged with us in conversation. But just from my own perspective, the ability to be able to track a GPS on a container is going to provide better information, more quality information as to the whereabouts of that container, which has been one of the issues that we deal with on a day in and day out basis. You go onto a carrier website, or you get an arrival notice that says containers coming in on such and such date, and it's either there a week early or a week late. So having GPS information will give us real-time data. But there hasn't been direct discussion with the carriers on that, but definitely follow that one up. I yield.
All right, so at this time, I know we're a little behind schedule, but we will turn it over to the chassis subcommittee discussion. And we are done with the presentations in the room, so if you could just put on the Zoom for the members, we'd appreciate that. That's for the tech. All right, over to Steve.
Great, thank you. I'd like to acknowledge Gabriel and Rich for the colorful presentations, and next time I'll bring a 45-slide deck on chassis to get you all up to speed, but no, in all seriousness, right? In all seriousness, so we are the youngest of the newest of the subcommittees. We started in November of 22 when coming out of the pandemic, and as a result, we've met with a number of folks within the system, starting off with General Lyons, the former port envoy, to gather a national perspective on chassis. From there, we've moved to Port, Harbor Trucking, American Trucking Association, Inland Ports, and American Association of Railroads are next on the agenda to meet with. But during that time, as some of you may know, there was a pending case in front of the FMC with the Intermodal Carriers Conference and the OSEMA. And so as a result, we had to pause our work in terms of recommendations so that as to not cause conflict between the FMC commissioners and the actual pending case. Since then, the FMC has affirmed its initial findings as it relates to box rolls, which impact 4 markets: Los Angeles, Chicago, Savannah, Memphis, and Long Beach. And so coming out of this, we are going to be meeting with the American Association of Railroads and looking at chassis impact, and then looking at how this potentially could be expanded to other ports across the United States. And so we are eager to hear public comments and to get more feedback from the community to understand how box rolls impact daily movement in order to kind of help support further findings. So that is all we have, and we'll keep it short and sweet. What questions do you have, if any? I win. I yield.
All right, so at this point, we are going to open up the meeting to public comment. I want to note that the public is always welcome to comment to the NSAC via email at nsac@fmc.gov. We at the Commission monitor that inbox and forward comments to the NSAC leadership as they arrive. I know sometimes, in fact, that there have been sort of discussions and sort of the beginnings of relationships built between the committee and some, outsiders based on some of those comments. So I really do encourage folks to comment and reach out to the committee. So please raise your hand if you do want to comment. My colleague here, Jeremy, will sort of walk around and he'll sort of direct you if there's a place you may need to stand in the room. But I ask all commenters to please provide your name and affiliation before beginning your comments. So.
Hello, my name is Carl Varner. I'm the VP of Logistics from Fernazer International. And I wanted to just mention, I reached out to my team. I particularly handle the pricing, but I reached out to our traffic team to get an update of real ERD impact. So we got 2 large bookings right now going to a country, and we booked consecutive weeks. Our shipments are rail fed. So the first particular booking has just been rolled, and the ERD has been pushed out. So now, in effect, we have the rail cars coming in, and we have to try to load both bookings in 1 week because both vessels are now sailing in the same week. So I'm just thinking that there should be some sort of means for us to, maybe the ocean carrier in that respect needs to give us space on the following vessel, since that's how we set up the business. And because we have rail cars and we can't change it. So, and we have particular rail capacity. So I want to just mention that perhaps you're already working on it. This is my first time attending one of these meetings, and I think it's excellent. Another point I wanted to mention, I got to run because I got to get to the airport, but you know, with the FMC and what happened with the Red Sea surcharges, I do want to mention that I think it was out of order for the justificate, or however they justified allowing the ocean carriers to bill cargo without 30 days notice. And I'm sure perhaps you're already working on that issue. I don't know. But that was a very serious, you know, I've been in the business 30 years, and I've never seen anything like that, where we had shipments that were already on the water, in transit, the Houthis shoot, and all of a sudden we're looking at like 200 grand that we can't add to our sales. So those are my two things. I apologize for my attire and not being able to hang out, but I appreciate the work that you're all doing. I really do. And the industry needs you. So thank you very much. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Mike Shaughnessy. I am with Balsam Brands. We are an importer. We're a BCO. And I'd like to thank the NSAC for your work on the government holds. Those holds tend to be a significant penalty on us on an annual basis. In fact, we had one bill of lading where we had 400 days of detention and demurrage charged on us, 20 containers for 20 days. That's a small portion of what we have on a regular basis every year, and that was in 2023. So continued work on that is great, and I appreciate the thoughtful process about sharing the cost with all parties involved. Secondly, on the demurrage piece, we appreciate the work you guys are doing on that. While we understand that, you know, it's great to see that charges are passed through, but I think the fundamental issue with demurrage is that demurrage should be used as an incentive to move cargo off the port. One of the ways that we feel cargo can be moved off the port more quickly is to, since it is a shared space by all importers, making the ability to have free days on the port be standard across all BCOs would provide a means for us all to be in a fair space. I understand large BCOs do have the ability to get favorable terms from the ocean shippers, and I can see our colleague from Walmart writing down notes. But during the pandemic, we paid, you know, on the order of over $10 million in demurrage because we couldn't get our containers out because there were some BCOs that had containers in port. If you look back at the amount of days on port that were by large BCOs, they were 30, 60, 90 days where they were not paying anything, and we were sucking up all of those costs because we couldn't get to our containers. And I think, you know, sharing the cost equally on a shared resource is maybe a good idea that the committee should take up. Thank you for your time.
Daniel Krasenstein, Procon Pacific. We're a manufacturer of polypropylene super sacks, primarily in India to United States. Where we encounter our bottleneck is actually in the United States, not in India. That is, when a vessel calls New York, we're averaging 200 plus hours of time by the time the vessel discharges before it can even get on board rail. So this is not a cost issue. I'm not sure it's even under this committee's purview, but the coordination and finger pointing between the carriers and the rail of who's responsible for that congestion and moving containers, full inbound containers of laden cargo we're anxious for. Who's responsible to rush that cargo of fuel and through the port, get it on board the rail so it's not causing more congestion, seems to be an area that's been a bottleneck for quite some time, especially New York. Thank you.
Any other commenters? If not, I think Commissioner Vekich would like to make a few words.
Hi, my name is Max Vekich. I am the sole currently Biden appointee on the FMC. A couple of the commissioners are currently been renominated, Rebecca Dye, Republican, and Chairman Dan Maffei for re-upping an additional term. So they're currently Biden nominees as well. But right now I want to lord it over them. So I have the incumbent president's backing. So I think that you may feel underappreciated on this committee, and I want you to know that your input's been really important to us, and we need more, and we want more. And speaking of the Red Sea, we asked for some Red Sea input because, well, what do we do? And first of all, it wasn't the Federal Maritime Commission, it was the delegated authority provided to the commission to deal with emergency situations on the Red Sea surcharge. You'll notice we had a public hearing, which we don't do very often, on the Red Sea because we want to be sure everybody knows they're under a lot of scrutiny on what happens with rates in regard to the Red Sea. It's not an open checkbook. It's not an open season on customers that we're going to gouge everybody because we got a crisis. Now, I think we've gotten past that point. We don't need to do that. We shouldn't do that. You know, so many of you have been working on rebuilding relationships that, you know, got trashed during the pandemic and during the supply chain crisis. And I see real progress and real efforts being made. I see a real different attitude from the carriers, a little bit of humble pie. Of course, I like to remind them they made a lot of money, you know, and they did really well. But I was 50 years on the docks, and I was in the industry. So this is an industry that has been feast or famine. And if you're not aware of that, you should really know that. It's not always, you know, the salad days. There's a lot of lean years ahead too. And so, and the carriers, you know, sometimes they like to plead poverty, that sometimes it's justified, sometimes it's a little exaggerated. But, you know, we're a symbiotic relationship. We need to keep going. But on the Red Sea, you know, we had delegated authority. Our agency reacted in a prompt manner, but those surcharges certainly were not going to go without scrutiny. That's why we had that hearing. That's why we asked Rich, unfairly probably, that we had tried to get you guys to give us some input because, you know, but we were looking for other, you know, all we could in a hurry. So, because it was an emergency. Now, luckily, I don't know. Like they said, I remember both of the incidents that closed the Suez Canal, and 7 days or 8 years, you know. There was also, it was closed during World War I. I might add that because I like history, so I'll throw that one in there. So it's been closed 3 times. Yeah, it's not going to be forever. It's going to get, we're going to get by that one. But also, we're going to be sure we're keeping a close eye, and the agencies at least keep a close eye on any surcharges related to the Suez closing. But again, you know, we like a lot of the carriers tell us, you know, it's they look to our agency for global regulation, really, and I don't know that we all realized that that was real. But this was a good reminder. So also, let's talk about your advisory. You know, you guys are a really valuable resource. And we do look and we study and we argue about your input. And we got some of those issues that you had listed that we haven't responded to yet. Well, there's some are going to get responses. Some aren't ripe yet. And some are being argued about, and you know, there's five of us, so we're not quite like the Supreme Court, but you know, you got to get 3 of the 5 to agree on things, and that's not always easy. However, the more information we get, the better. I think Commissioner Bensel on his data stuff, you know, it's complicated, and I think there's a realization that we need more normalization and standardization out there so we speak the same language. But internally, there's a lot of resistance in this industry to speak the same language, you know? And so let's just say, I think we can get there. And I think we can speak the same language. But then again, there's going to be the big question of, are we going to mandate something, or is this going to be voluntary? You know, I love Commissioner Dye's approach. Let's go with best practices and let's describe best practices. And I think on the data thing, for one, that's a possibility. But is that going to be enough and make you happy? And does that get us to where we need to go in the supply chain to make a difference? I don't know. But doing nothing, I think, is probably not an option. So this FMC is not interested in doing nothing. Maybe previous FMCs have been interested in doing nothing or keeping the status quo going. But I think the actions of our agency have shown, you know, we are the expert agency on maritime supply chains. And we have the enforcement powers, and we're serious about it. And I think more than ever before in recent history, we've exercised those. We have great staff. Many of them are here. I want you to be sure to take advantage, if you see them, to fully engage with them, because that's why they're here. And they're here, they've networked. It's important you know who they are, so you know who to call. And also, I have my attorney here, Corey Sinkyu, in my office. Corey's one of the senior attorneys in the agency. See, I was an old union guy, so when one of the senior attorneys applies to be my counselor, well, I jumped on seniority right like that. But, you know, I think this is fascinating times we're living in. Too interesting for my taste, actually. I was thinking this would be a little more a whole hum of an era, but wow, we're as dynamic. A shipping act change, those happen like once a generation, if that. And I'm not so sure, though, that we're done, because I think there's a window open, and I think it's important that you have these squeaky wheels, because we need to ensure our maritime supply chain. And to me, and some of the Maritime Academy graduates, the Naval Academy graduates and veterans, and my dad was a World War II veteran. I had uncles in the Navy, World War II veterans. I mean, we're going to have to be sure we can protect global commerce. And that's something that's important. And you guys help by your comments, you help bring to the fore that global commerce is important. And not only is it important, there are weak spots that need to be protected, and we need to fix them. So let's not be involved in self-inflicted wounds. And I think the FMC is determined to make the supply chain better. You know, my first lesson I learned when my first day on the docks was, cargo always has to move. We called it the cargo hook then. The hook has to keep moving. And that, I think, is a great incentive, that we have to always incentivize cargo movement, not just in our country, but globally. But I want to thank you for your service. Your input's not going on deaf ears, and we need it, and it's vital. Rich, you did an excellent job. I think we could get you a part-time job, or maybe a full-time job at the FMC if you're interested. You know, Mike, thank you so much, you guys.
Outstanding, thanks.
Yeah, you know, you saved us a lot of work with your introduction. So you kind of did an excellent job of covering all the bases. And thanks for working with our office, and we really appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing you all. And you're always welcome in DC. You know, our agency is absolutely user-friendly, as you know. Thanks.
I was going to ask one question, Commissioner Vestrick, if you could. I think, you know, you're working the refusal to deal, right? And the original notice of proposed rulemaking, I believe you got 19 responses from the industry in the two most worst years probably in the history of containerization. Then you put out a supplemental notice solicit more feedback. How much more have you gotten? And because I think it's important for the people in the room to understand the value of providing feedback and guidance like Carl did to you as an agency to help inform kind of the broad frame of the issue and what's going on, to think about what may need to be done about it. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Are we out of town? No, you can't say a whole lot about it because it's still under consideration. I know that. One of the things the FMC staff is really good at is keeping commissioners out of trouble. And this is an ongoing issue. And I think I can say we got additional, but I can't get into it, and it's coming. Something is coming, and I think, I don't even know how
Well,
much
I think my point more is about the importance of feedback. We don't need to know the rule or how many people you heard from, but I think what we continue to struggle with, even with NSAC, is not getting feedback on what Gabriel and Alexis are working on, or Rich and Bob are working on, or Deb and Steve are working on. And I think that's what is the importance of feedback in the process, I think, overall, as you guys look at how you're either adjusting a rule or looking at rulemaking, because I think that needs to be made, it needs to be understood by the people in the room and who are with us virtually, because that's the missing piece, I think, in my personal view, in participating in this process for the last 2 years, even in the work that just NSAC's doing, let alone the complexity of the work the agency's doing.
To date, I haven't heard anybody on our staff complain about lack of feedback, and that we think we're getting an adequate amount. However, more is always better. More is always better, and diversity, is always better. So the more we get from the wider range of people is better. And I see, it's a real desire. I mean, to make our supply system work, we have to, be sure we have all the information we can. More data points, like we were hearing about all last 3 days, seem to be really important. So that more data points we get, the better. FMC is the same way.
Thank you, Commissioner. All right, so at this point, we'll move to sort of the final remarks for the today's meeting. I'll turn it back over to Mike.
Like you haven't heard from me enough today. Okay, I do like to talk about stuff. So I think, again, I want to really thank the people who stayed today to attend this meeting, whether you're going to be here anyway or not. I think your engagement in the room, the comments you've made, I've made notes on them. And I believe the other people that are participating on the respective committees have made note of it, because, again, the feedback from our perspective is important. So as we look at the ongoing work, I think that what I want to convey is kind of what I talked about in the beginning, right? That, the issues we're facing are both national and global. But I think more to the point that was made by Fernando, they're long-standing. They pre-existed the pandemic and the shocks to the system, whether it was the pandemic or global crisis, global economic crisis back in 2008. Some of these things are ongoing and yet not resolved. At the same time, they're complex. So there is not a simple, clear, and straightforward answer to resolution. And it requires a collaborative effort. Again, my view as the leading economy in the world is the U.S. should lead on this. And I think, with an agency like the FMC, we've got an avenue to work structurally on some of these things, and NSAC supports that work. Most importantly, I think for the work of NSAC, we want to continue to hear from you on, are we looking at the issue from the right frame of reference? Is something missing? Does this work for you as an active shipper in the system who bears risk, $400,000, more than that, 7 figures? Does what's being proposed help you as an individual enterprise in the system? Because we're trying to solve at the system level, but the benefit needs to be at the firm level and everything else that's going on. So the ask, I think, from my perspective is to continue to engage. There may be things that are more important to you or less important to you, depending on your company, your industry, part of the country that you're in, but we do, as NSAC, want to hear from you more than we are today, and we appreciate everybody's attendance, both in person and online. And I'll call it a wrap.
All right, so that concludes the agenda for today. I want to thank everyone for staying through and listening to today's discussions. I hope they were insightful to folks. So I'll conclude the meeting. Thanks, everyone.